Time's rude defendants got instant karma in court. Dante Wright. Killers like Dante Wright always get a lesson in respect, especially when it's inside a courtroom. Dante Wright had the nerve to act in a mocking manner, and he was on trial for the murder of teenager Jordan Clee. The crime took place in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in October 2016, when Wright and two other criminals, all teenagers, tried to rob Clee at gunpoint. Clee must have tried to resist, however, as he was found with a gunshot wound. It was a true tragedy, as Clee was apparently a top student, and he had to lose his life to three others around his age, who had nothing to live for. Dante Wright was arrested and got a separate trial from the other two, and things were going smoothly in favor of the justice system, as Wright admitted to doing the shooting. However, Wright couldn't let things go so simply for long, as he had to provoke the entire courtroom during a statement by the victim's mom.
October 4th, 2016, at 18 years old, and more than that, I've lost laughter and love.
Prior to the statement, Wright was about to make a plea deal for the confession, but once Clee's mum started talking, obviously very emotionally, Wright showed his true colors and proved that the criminal instinct in him remained, as he kept smiling, smirking, and almost laughing during the entire statement.
Has no future. Jordan can no longer choose to go to college. Jordan can no longer choose to change.
God knows what was going through his mind, but it definitely didn't look like guilt or remorse for what he'd done. The judge was soon fed up with Wright's attitude and threatened to take away his plea deal, despite Clee's family accepting it.
Watching you sit there, smile, and laugh, and shake your head like this was no big deal, I'm very tempted to just say, I'm not going to accept this sentence agreement. We'll go to trial, and if you're convicted of felony murder, you'll go to prison for the rest of your life. That means you'll die there.
Ultimately, Wright will trade in his graduation cap and gown for a prison uniform, as he was given 23 to 50 years for armed robberies, felony firearm possession, and second-degree murder. Wright's antics were nothing compared to literally lashing out, like Alan McCarty, who seemed to have no idea how powerful judges and courts are, as he threw around threats and slurs left and right. The insanity started in 2017, when McCarty had some reservations about a custody case he was involved in, and instead of filing for appeal or talking to his lawyer, he instead thought it was a good idea to call the Volusia County Sheriff's Office and tell them he was about to commit a crime, threatening the building with a gun and threatening to execute the judge who'd ruled against him in the custody case, Stacia Warren. Not realizing how easy it was to trace a call, McCarty's voice was identified and he was immediately arrested and put on trial. However, this is when things got off the rails, as McCarty continued his insane threat spree in court, while also shouting out slurs and insulting the judge.
You stupid piece of You threatened my life.
Obviously, he was taken outside the courtroom by force, and the patience of the security not to slap him right across the face as he was yelling is extremely admirable. In what's probably the easiest guilty judgment to prove in the history of the county, McCarty received 29 years in prison for threatening to murder the judge, as well as extra time for contempt of court charges.
These are a bunch of here. No, you're not taking my fingerprints. I'm not going to let you. That's right. Don't touch me, and don't never touch my kids. Give me my law paperwork.
It's crazy how all of this could have been avoided if he just kept his mouth shut. No wonder he lost that custody case. But in some cases, criminals just make it worse and worse for themselves, such as Michael Ray, who got to court with 4 charges and left with 10. This court heckler was supposed to be given an average bond hearing, but when he heard his bond at $25,000, he started laughing and made things so much worse for himself.
County's requesting $25,000 full cash behind all charges. Looks like the
You think that's funny?
I think that's hilarious.
The judge, however, seemed to be more thug-like than the thug himself and gave him an additional $25,000.
And I think,
All right, so bond is $50,000. No bail credit.
When he really should have stopped there and counted his losses, Ray insisted on getting into this fight with the law that he really couldn't win, and threatened the judge and even insulted the officer next to him who was just trying to help.
Give a what's the holding me in?
And so...
You're just making it worse, man.
You shut you man, you are
All right, you can take him back.
The judge had had enough of this nonsense and got him back in court for contempt and gave him 100 days in jail. Sometimes a runny mouth can get you into more trouble than a gun.
Done yet.
I think we need to
Yeah.
days
don't
to serve.
care.
Okay.
Yep.
For what? Because of 2 EPOs and a criminal mission case?
He's done.
Can we bring him back?
He's
I want
gotta
him
be
charged with
charged.
threatening.
Ray now has 10 charges against him.
Michael Ray isn't the only one whose mouth got him in bigger trouble, as did our next criminal, Tobias Roman, who seemed to have forgotten his brain in his cell before heading to court.
My foot hurts. I can't stand up right now. Put my right hand. Giggle.
As he threatened to murder the judge. Tobias was in court for stalking and threatening a mall employee with a knife, as well as other felonies, but right from the start in court, Tobias wasn't going to have this case open and shut easily. For one, he had a very strange demeanor, down to his very saggy pants. He also refused to stand up and was very defensive about the judge calling him Tobias, or his street name, Giggles.
Tobias, my first name. That's it. Giggles or Tobias.
What an accurate name, though, as this guy turned out to be a real Joker type, telling the judge to be quiet, and then threatening to kill him if he sees him outside. You can tell that the judge was surprised, but not shaken, as he requested that this threat be written down in the transcript and charged Tobias with robbery, terroristic threats, exhibiting a deadly weapon, stalking, and threatening a Supreme Court judge. If only these criminals knew that they're not getting one over on a judge, like it was their high school teacher.
Roman, you need to be quiet. You got one more chance and then you're going to be removed from the courtroom. That'll be your choice. Go through it. Roman's statement on the record that he will murder me if he sees me, and I'm going to request law enforcement to take the appropriate action.
While these criminals somewhat kept their composure, others had a full meltdown, like Milton Watts, who seemed to be having an existential crisis in court, swearing up a storm.
Can I give you a piece of advice?
What?
You can either make life easy or you can make life hard.
I already ruined my life.
That's 60. You want to go for 90? That's 90 more. That's 180. That's 360.
I'm working at McDonald's. Now I gotta fucking come here and my life up.
Watts was in court for missing another court date for an unknown charge.
You were supposed to be here last month. You did not appear. Why weren't you here?
I had work.
But while it could have ended at some bail, Watts decided it was a good idea to argue with someone powerful enough to have him spend a year in prison. Watts first nonchalantly waved off the question of why he was in court, giving excuses of work or a family emergency. And when the judge asked him to hire a new attorney because he had backed off the case, Watts then decided to literally throw his life away, saying that he doesn't care. This brief exchange led to a swearing meltdown, where the judge kept on adding 30 days upon 30 days of contempt, and Watts just kept going. You'd think he would have stopped at 6 months, but he went all the way up to a year.
You!
Melvin, stop!
How many days you want to give me now? Are you sir counting?
Melvin,
Yeah, I'm at about a year right now in contempt, so.
He's got mental problems. He's not on medication.
Ma'am, I don't care.
I don't give a
Melvin, stop!
Fuck everybody.
With everyone asking him to stop, it seemed like Watts was suddenly re-evaluating his life choices with his meltdown, including his job at McDonald's. What did McDonald's ever do to him? Well, those orders are going to have to wait at least a year, since they don't make Big Macs in prison. Not all outbursts were for minor court missings. Some were by actual monsters, like Daryl Brooks, who terrorized Waukesha, Wisconsin during a Christmas parade in November 2021. In a scene of true horror, Brooks drove his Ford Escape through the parade, killing 6 people and injuring 62. The entire city was reeling from the attack, but justice was swift and Brooks was arrested on the same night. Things didn't go so smoothly from there, though, as Brooks made his court hearings hell for the judge, jury, and witnesses, with several outbursts over every little thing. It didn't help that he was also representing himself.
Not the inevitable. It was already written from day one what was going to happen. It doesn't make me lose any sleep.
After objecting to every single thing the judge said, shouting loudly in court, and refusing to comply, Brooks was removed from court because of his provocative comments. By the end of his solitary trial, however, he got a sentencing that would have him pay back every life he took that November night, with 6 life sentences and 61 counts of reckless endangerment. To put that in perspective, Brooks could be able to live till the age of 800, and he'd still be in prison. Not all judges are as calm and collected as the one in Brooks' case, however, such as in the case of Cameo Gant.
And you're gonna shut your mouth or I'm gonna have some duct tape put on it.
Was so relentless and provocative in both her crime and in court that she made the judge throw a fit. Gant was arrested for the brutal murder of her boyfriend, Marcel Hill, in 2013, whom she stabbed 11 times, and attacked with multiple weapons, such as a frying pan, floor lamp, and an end table. Gant argued that it was self-defense, but how many people defend themselves with that many weapons and that kind of rage behind a knife? Gant was immediately arrested, but in court, she had the gall to ridicule every little thing, even the statements of the victims' families, rolling her eyes and laughing at them. She kept claiming innocence, and at one point she made the judge so angry that he threatened to duct tape her mouth. It seemed like even the attorney knew she was guilty, telling the judge to do what he was to do. Ultimately, she received life in prison with no possibility of parole, but she still tried to plead her innocence, which set the judge off to the point of wishing she dies in prison.
I agree with the family. I hope you die in prison as well. You know, if this was a death penalty state, you'd be getting the chair.
Was the judge right? Or should he have controlled his emotions? We'll leave that up to you. Funnily enough, outbursts in court aren't always in court, such as Ebony Burks, who went off during her trial on Zoom and talked her way into 300 days of jail.
What you about to say?
Oh, nothing. We'll talk in 6 months when you're ready to come back for your case.
Burks was facing domestic violence charges. And even though everything could have been resolved if she'd paid the $15,000 bond, it was the judge's ruling that she can't come in contact with her grandfather, Shedrick McRae, that set her off.
That means you can't call him, you can't write him, you can't text him, you can't email him, can't leave a message on some social media, you can't go visit him. If you go someplace and either Mr. McRae or Miss Castro's there, you have to leave. If you're someplace, even though you may have arrived first and one of them shows up, you still have to leave.
So you gonna tell me I can't go home?
I'm telling you, you can't go home. If you live with...
Whoa, I'm talking. I don't need you to say nothing.
If you live with Mr. McRae, you cannot return to that residence.
Oh, but how you just gonna tell me I can't go home now?
Burks lived with McRae, and that ruling meant she couldn't go home. When the judge confirmed that she, in fact, had to stay away from the house, they got into a classic contempt battle, where Burks talked back, and the judge kept adding 30 days after 30 days after 30 days.
Contempt, young lady, and you've got 30 days. So you're not going to... You're not... What?
Whoa.
Get back! Get back! Get back! That's another 30 days. That's 60 days.
So what?
90 days.
So?
120 days.
Okay, and?
180 days.
Burks really didn't know where to stop, and she didn't seem to realize the trouble she was in. You'd think at the 200-day mark she would have quieted down, but no, she had to go and cuss out the judge. Sometimes judicial authority really pays off though, as the judge responded as anyone in this position would, racking up her contempt to 300 days. Ironically, she was worried that she didn't have a place to live, and her antics secured her one for the next 300 days, even if it's a small place of residence with bars.